What's up, Gould Miners? Today, we welcome Trever Ahing to the show. Trevor is an expert in all things creative real estate and is the CEO of Buyer Beater University, an online platform that helps aspiring real estate investors learn the ins and outs of creative real estate. And in today's episode, we go deep into some really interesting and novel creative real estate strategies, particularly Novation real estate, which is a strategy that involves partnering with home sellers to help them renovate their property, list it for sale, and ultimately sharing in the upside of the sale. Later on in the episode, Trevor shares the different structures that you can use when doing Novation deals and what structures are appropriate for what circumstances. And finally, we conclude the episode by going over some of the other creative financing strategies that Trevor is bullish on in 2024, 2025, and beyond. I came away from this conversation with a ton of respect for Trevor. Not only is he a veteran, he's also come up with a strategy to effectively help home sellers maximize the equity in their property and helping them participate in the upside. Some really interesting things going on in this episode, and it really does feel like he is on the precipice of really changing the real estate game with this Novation real estate approach. So without further ado, let's welcome to the show, Trever Ahing.
The Gould Mine Podcast.
Trevor, welcome to Gould Mine.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it, Danny.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to chat with you, and let's just dive right into it because I've never heard of Novation real estate. What is that? Can you just explain it to me?
Absolutely, man. It's a leg from creative finance, right? We're gonna go right in the rabbit hole of creative financing and real estate. Now, it's not as complicated. I always say creative should be complementary, shouldn't be confusing. So, in layman's terms, innovation, right? It really just means a replacement of one's position on an original contract, which is just a fancy way of saying it's an on-market wholesale. It's just kind of like an assignment contract or a wholesale, except when you wholesale a home, right? You have a seller, with a contract at a certain set price. You usually keep it off market, right? And you just lock in. You have the rights to the contract, and you go, "Hey, any investors over here? Right? I have a good off-market deal. You could pay me a little bit of money and I'll assign the contract so you can flip the deal, right? You're the bridge builder between a distressed home and a investor." Think about the same thing for on market. What I do is I work directly with homeowners who they go, "Man, I hate these cash offers. They're super low, right? I need something a little bit more." And I say, "Okay, well, how about this? Let's lock you into a certain net price, right? A certain price for your home. I'll come in there and I can clean your home up a little bit. I'll pay to renovate your home up to a certain standard, right? And then instead of assigning it to an investor, I'll just put it on market with an agent, right? Now, when I sell it to a third-party and conventional buyer, like a VA or FHA or conventional buyer, I'll cover all the realtor fees and closing costs. Whatever's left over will be a return on my money. So instead of going all cash to a distressed asset and trying to assign it off market to somebody who's going to be able to buy it for pennies, I go, let me give you $5,000 or let me put $10,000. I've even done up to $300,000 in these houses to work the seller into their own equity and then basically collaborate with them to then sell it on market and take the upside above what they want. So I assume the risk, but I assume the reward, and I get to do that nationwide.
That's awesome. So, right, and that's actually it's a very interesting concept. There are companies out there that do this, right? There are certain there are some
more personal.
Yeah. So did you coin the phrase Novation or who came up with that name?
You heard it here first. You heard it here first, folks. No, I didn't. Right. Man. I didn't coin it. I stumbled into Novations. I didn't start with it, right? I started with wholesale real estate, right? I started getting in front of that and house hacking while I was in the military. I'll get into that story, but long story short, I watched a podcast with Pace Morby, right? And Daddy Pace, and he talked about Novations where you can really you don't have to put any work into them. You can just try to offer the seller more and say, "Look, I'll do that, but if I'm just going to test the optimism on the market, let me just list it for you. And the only way that I'll get a fee is if I can find a buyer and I'll cover all your realtor fees and closing costs." So it was just more of an on-market approach. I thought I invented the fact that you could renovate the home with the seller until about 6 months in. I was bragging about it. And then they were like, "No, it's just another Novation, you idiot. Like it's the same thing." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah." So it's like a seller finance flip, but that's kind of what I was known for. That was like my bread and butter, to kind of partner with the seller. So that's my.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Now, I'm assuming that there's a lot of ways to structure this, right? But what if the home doesn't sell?
Great question. Great question. So if the home doesn't sell, right, here's the thing. We are very picky at where we do these opportunities. I do deals everywhere where I put $5,000 or less into the home, and I understand, my risk tolerance, right? I'm okay if I lose a couple $1,000 because I see the upside of trying to test the market for FHA, VA. Now let's talk about the real question, which is, what if you put $25,000 into this property and it doesn't sell, right? I like to break down the numbers behind that because there is a formula that I have to utilize to even entertain a deal, right? So in a traditional wholesale model, if a property is worth $500,000 fully renovated, let's say you're doing a traditional, wholesale formula. So you're going at, 75 cents on the dollar. So that's 75%. Let's say it needs $50,000 worth of work minus you want to make $20,000. You're able to offer that seller about $280,000 for their home. And I always say, if it's a wholesale deal, let's do a wholesale deal, right? I can't close with the seller in 21 days because if they want to get their profit, they need to work with our patience, right? We have to be able to, they can't have their cake and eat it too. And so we'll anchor low, right? Danny will anchor low and we'll go, hey, this is what we can do. I can offer $280,000 as is. And they go, Trevor, that offer frickin' sucks, kick rocks. I can't do that. I go, okay, what's a number that makes sense for you? You go, well, our tenants just left. They trash the place. I'm older. I'm just trying to liquidate because I hate dealing with rentals or whatever, right? I go, okay, well, look, what's your number? If they say $350,000, that's $70,000 more than what you can offer, through wholesale. But you just go, great. You go, okay, well, if they want $350,000 and it needs $50,000 to, worth of work, I can bring that cash in as more of a private money lender with them. I can lean myself against the home, attach myself, through collateral. Now I'm all in at $400,000. Well, I just force appreciated the home to, appraise at $500,000. We put it on market. I cover realtor fees and closing costs. My walkaway is $465, right? I'm all in at $400. My 50 just made me $65,000, right? So I worked the seller into $70,000 more of their equity. I took on the renovation piece with my crew and local contract experts. I really only do this in about 5 states with, the teams that I have. And then from there, I'm able to assume the optimism of the sale and they love it, right? A lot of the homeowners love it. You have to be very transparent with them. And sometimes they go, oh, well, let me go back to your original question was, what if it doesn't sell? So I throw it on market at 500. The market tanks a little bit. Nothing's moving for 5. You got to dip it to 480 for it to sell. Well, that means my 50 just made me 45,000, right? So I'm able to work in cushion because the only thing that I have in there is the rental cost. And so another thing that we have done to build our rental portfolio is if it's having a hard time to sell and we like the area or we want to cost segregate or, we're okay holding the debt. Well, I already have the A to B with the seller. I know it's already appraised at a certain amount. I'll just subject to the property myself with them and I can refinance them out the A to B. And so I'm able to refinance my cost out or at least majority of it them. And now I'm on title and I can be able to rent the property out. So worst case, I just grow my rental portfolio because I just kind of partnered up with them to renovate it so I can end up offsetting it into my portfolio.
Yeah. So, and that makes a lot of sense, right? So obviously, like I suspected that the answer was going to be something along the lines of, well, we would just not burr it, but refinance it, right? And then it's kind of like a burr, right? You're not technically buying it, but you're aside, you're almost like wholesaling it, right, to yourself and then refinancing, kind of. It's an interesting concept. So, what's the average renovation budget for one of these properties? Or because you said $5,000 or $10,000, so I'm a little confused there.
Yeah. So Novations falls under, it's like an umbrella term for 2 things. I offer 2 things to homeowners, right? I call one the equity protection, the other one the equity split. Okay. So if the equity protection, just think occupied. I've done it a couple times where you do a whole live and flip. It's a freaking nightmare, right? I'm not going to fully renovate a home 2024 turnkey and move the couple into the bedroom while I do the kitchen and the master, and so I don't want to look at trying to even attempt getting this thing fully renovated. But even if I don't tackle ARV, after repair value, I get it to what we call current condition retail value. So I talk to a local agent and I go, well, the seller wants $360,000. I know properties that are fully fixed up in the area go for $500,000. And I just say, what's going to happen if I throw $7,000 into this property? Are there any big fixes I got to do? So I'm able to renovate the home with some new paint. I clean up the landscaping. I paint the fascia. I kind of do a deep clean of a hoarder house. And that way, when I put it back on the market, I have some great curb appeal. So I don't target 500, but then I could target 430, leave some equity in there, some sweat equity for the first time home buyer or VA guy that wants to come in there. And then the seller still at 350, 360. So that way, after realtor fees, closing costs, my 5 can still make me 30. But also I had 3 last year that didn't sell. Right. And so I always tell my homeowner on the current condition retail value, I say, look, the only way I can ever even get you close to that price is if you and I work together. Right. There's a couple things that we can do. Your price is outside of my buy box, and I do buy a lot. We have 18 active flips right now, but I can't do it at that price. But what I can do is I have some funds ready to go. I can approve you for our equity protection program. All that means is we're going to lock you into a certain number that you're very comfortable with. We'll come in there and let me just clean it up for you. Right? Let me get some things done that I know that it's going to be necessary. So that way, when buyers come in, they're going to want to buy the house. It's going to attract the right people. Yeah. I'll cover the realtor fees and closing costs. And whatever's left over, I'll keep. And they love it. And I always just say, if it takes 60 days on market, we don't find the right buyer, at least you know what your property could sell for. You get a clean house and you get the pleasure of firing me. And then they chuckle, and then we walk away from those. The equity split side, though, that's a fully renovated home. We open up escrow with the intent to buy and or novate. So I throw earnest in there, right? I come in there, I'm able to cloud title, I have a position on the home, and I say, hey, we're working together, right? I'm really renovating this to make this thing worth its true value, right? So anything above that, if it doesn't sell, I'm just going to be able to protect my investment by buying you out because I know what it's going to appreciate for. So then I can just refinance them out and end up holding it. And that's why I say, I really focus on specific areas. I'm not going to do that model in some city in Arkansas I've never been to, but I'll do the other type of novation. But yeah, we really focus on certain cities and certain states for where I plan on parking a lot of my money. Anything over 5,000, it's got to be in areas that I've been in before.
Yeah, it makes sense. So the equity protection is low risk to you.
Very
right?
low risk. I'd even done a deal where it's $0.
Yeah, really.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Interesting. And then what's the incentive there for the like if you're putting $0 into it, like are you putting any sweat equity at all, or like?
I mean, look, to an extent, you take over 3 things, right? It's the marketing, maintenance, and management of the home. A lot of the sellers that reach out to me, I don't do direct-to-seller campaigning anymore. I have a community that brings me deals, and I basically fund it. You find it, I fund it. That's how we can kind of collaborate. But think about it. When I used to go direct-to-seller, and you had a property, not too far from me, and they just go, hey, I'm looking at selling quick, and I get in front of a cash price, and they're like, no, I can't do that. Right. And I go, well, what can you do? Right. And they're at a certain number. And I'm like, man, probably the only market that can, the only way that you can get that price is probably on market. And they go, I don't want to involve an agent. I don't want to pay for realtor fees. I'm embarrassed. And so dealing with situations like that, I can target, a more of a pocket listing approach with agents I've worked with that specialize with investors or specialize with VA or FHA. Yeah. And I can just kind of position them on over and make sure that I'm able to get a sale where they don't feel taken advantage of. They don't feel like they've gotten in front of opening their home to people because I call it the 4 Ds, right? Death, distress, divorce, and debt. So they're in a pretty intimate situation. I don't want to blast that on the MLS, but I'm still able to kind of provide the service of taking over the marketing, maintenance, and the management of getting their home sold.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So now, for someone that's just getting started, right? Because this seems to me like not like an advanced technique, right? But like it's definitely more advanced than say wholesaling, right? Where it's just like, hey, you're taking a contract, you're kind of like assigning it to someone else. How did you get started, Trevor? Like let's go back to the beginning. I want to hear kind of what got us to this point.
Yeah. So I mean, from the beginning, and by the way, I'm a nerd with it, but I actually think it's easier than wholesaling. I think there's ways that you can pocket out the right kind of buyer for it, and I'll get into that. But I totally agree with you, right? I totally agree. This is a nuanced approach. And I think once it clicks, it's just kind of like the mentality, Vice, then it's just an easy A to B with wholesale for sure. But man, I started out when I was in the military, right? I did 8 years in the Marine Corps. About 5 years in, I got married, and my wife, I was gonna do 30 years. My wife said, I'm gonna become a real estate agent. I'm like, you're a pretty ass Filipino woman, go crush it. Like you sell my friends all the houses. Had no inkling in real estate. And it was a bigger pocket seminar that we bought like $60 for. It was like some local thing in San Diego. Well, my wife chickened out, and I'm like, I'm not wasting $60. So I'm like, I'm going to go to this thing and I'm going to, and so I got a little curious. I went to the event, and the really cool thing was I thought real estate was super suit and tie, very much so the Ryan Serhants of real estate. And I mean, very professional. And I love that side, but it didn't appeal to me until I started meeting a bunch of millionaires there, drinking beer and board shorts and sandals, owning 100 units, and I'm like, you can do this? And they're like, yeah, and I was like, wow. So I ended up coming back and I befriended a couple people, and they told me about VA house hacking. They're like, oh, you're in the military, you must use your VA. What have you bought? I'm like, I haven't bought anything. And they said, oh my goodness, use your VA loan, buy a house, rent out all the rooms to your buddies. And the cool thing about real estate is you just copy what everybody else is doing. I'm like, oh, that works. So I didn't want to recreate the wheel. I got approved. I bought a house and I rented all my rooms out to my buddies who get basic allowance for housing, and they paid me half of it. And I was like, I'm rich. We're cash flowing all this money. Look, honey. And I got very much so addicted to it. Instead of just renting out the rooms now, I put bunk beds in my living room. I started really doubling up and trying to make as much money as possible. And my wife she was such a sweetheart. She dealt with it for a long time. And then I realized, well, there's levels to this. And so from there, I saved up some money. I bought a mentorship to go into wholesale real estate. And actually, people usually have a pretty bad taste in their mouth, with that. I mean, I'm so great friends with the guy. We've done a bunch of deals together. So it just worked out very well for me, right? And so I got into wholesale real estate. I had a couple cold callers after my time off work, between 7 and 9 p.m. I would call my leads. And then, from there, I would flirt with the old ladies, talk work stories with the men, and get some wholesale deals. But the really big shift for me, Danny, was I wanted to get my license, because they would always be like, dude, you're at cash offer sucks, but I like you. Can you list my house? And I'm like, no, I don't have a license. But we'll get it. Got my license, started listing all these crappy homes because it's the same audience. I'm just putting houses out there. And so I just bridged the gap one day and I said, what if I just renovate the homes for them? And I had someone else list it and revisited all my dead deals, and they all said yes and they loved it. And I just built a model out that.
Nice. Okay. Makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So you've talked a lot about VA loans and kind of like the power, maybe the untapped power of VA loans. And so we're going to switch gears here a little bit. How can veterans leverage VA loans to invest in real estate? What are some of the strategies that you've seen work best? I mean, I know that VA loans are used for primary residences, but you've talked about investing in, using VA or leveraging veteran incentives.
Yeah. So look, first and foremost, I get a lot of service members in my DMs. I teach at the transitional readiness seminars, and it's cool to get in front of it. Financial literacy is not taught amongst the military, right? We work so much and so often. It's so much easier to rent because we move so much, and that just gives you the excuse to not even look into it at all, right? And so luckily I had a higher command that was able to be like, no, just do this. And I'm like, but I'm not going to live here forever. They're like, who cares? That's first and foremost, man, analysis paralysis. If you just got stationed somewhere, right, look at buying. Look at getting in front of something that's not a forever home, right? Don't care what people think on what you're purchasing. Find a great deal and leverage the 0% down so you can accumulate the wealth, right? There's so many ways to get into real estate. People just think, well, I'm in Virginia. I mean, this property in 2 years is only worth another 20 grand more. And I go, yeah, but you're amortizing it every single month, right? It's going to be great write-offs. It's getting in front of situations like that. And so I would just say, just shut up and do it. Talk to the people around you, identify that you can even go up to a 4-unit, right? Residential real estate is going to be categorized for the 3 up to 4 doors. I never found anything like that in San Diego because, I could barely even afford a freaking porta potty, in the area I was in, dude. But it worked. You found something and you get in front of it and you just realize that you can end up having that as a building block. And that's what your first property should be. It should be a building block. And so once you get involved with it, then you realize you go, it's not as scary, man. Just taking that first step. And so the VA, the veteran wealth that you could, you can accumulate every duty station that you move to, you can have different bonus VA eligibility, right? You can refinance and take your eligibility with you or your VA entitlement with you by going into a conventional loan. But first and foremost, I would just say, start asking questions, start asking around, and be the first one to raise your hand in that area or in your duty station and just say, I want to do this. because closed mouths don't get fed. And so that's a big thing I've been seeing is people going, wow, it's easier than you think. And it totally is. It seems not attainable, but it completely is.
Yeah, the house hacking idea, in house hacking meaning like you live in part of the house and then you rent out another part of the house, whether it be a duplex, triplex, or fourplex, or even like I think like are they doing a lot of ADUs right now in San Diego? Because up here in the Bay Area, it's like all the greats.
Yeah. I mean, they are. California incentivizes it. I never did that.
Yeah.
We have it's not permanent. It's kind of classified as like an outdoor shed space, but if you have casitas, crafters, you have things that you can do to allocate, get $30,000 to put it on your property. But first and foremost, guys, it just depends on how quickly you want to get there. I wanted to sprint. And so I said, I'm going to get a single family house. I'm just going to rent out all the rooms. Right. And I just started putting tape on the fridge and just said, hey, this is your shelf. This is your shelf. This is your shelf. And when people go, man,
that's awesome, man.
I don't want to live with people. And I go, well, then, just get there slower and then just do it a different way. You know what I mean? But there's different ways that you can get in front of it now. It just depends on what you want to sacrifice. And so you're already in the military, man. I mean, you're already sharing rooms with people at the barracks, And so I'm just like, dude, do it on your own roof, man.
Yeah. No, that's I think that's brilliant, man. And single family, or like you said, like you're renting rooms, renting units, right? Like it's all kind of the same thing. And depending on what part of the country you're in, it sounds like one size doesn't fit all, right? Like in San Diego, it's just a single family play, like, and we're renting out the rooms. But in other parts of the country, like duplex, triplex, fourplex might be possible. Although, with prices to where they're going right now, it's like, who knows, right? But definitely in some parts of the country, I think duplex or triplex could definitely be possible. Yeah, that's interesting, man. I think I think that it's a wonderful thing to be educating and to try to be educating vets and everything. Do you know? I had one of my buddies, David. He was actually the first guest on my podcast.
Right.
David Perret. Do you know David?
Oh my gosh, that sounds so familiar.
Military to Millionaire.
Yeah. I spoke on with him in Dallas. Yes, that guy. Yeah, dude. Yeah. I remember I hit him up. That was a full circle moment. I was on stage with him and I was like, this is so cool. He had no idea who I was. And, everybody like, you were godsend, right? And, because he's the one who got out. He did it, And so I remember hitting him up on Instagram. I was like, I'm going to be you one day. And then, it's funny. I showed him that text afterwards. We were having a drink together and he was like, cool, man. I'm like, no, this is legit. This is fun.
Yeah.
But he's doing it, dude. He's absolutely doing it. He's really giving back when it comes down to, to anything on the service side. And that's kind of what I'm doing as well, just through different means. He does more of the traditional. I do more of the creative.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, and I think that just, educating the, vets and everything, finding that niche and then committing to it is awesome, dude. So yeah, that's great. And especially the Marines. I mean, because I think he was a Marine guy too, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Yeah, don't they say that Marines are the smartest? Isn't that what they or this
Yeah, it's exactly how it goes, brother.
Or is it the SEALs or? Yeah,
no,
I don't know.
Yeah, Air Force is the smartest, my guy. We are the crane eaters. That's what they say. Yeah, and that's funny. We lean into my buddy in the ad's a different story. I was gonna tell a funny story, but we lean into that hardcore, and that's why I always say, man, it's so funny because now if I could do it, anybody can do it. It really is just always being a student, and now a lot of my lenders. They're colonels, they're majors in the Air Force. There's some big, heavy cats. And it's just really cool to be able to see exactly, what you could specialize in and what foundation you can build to be able to kind of give back to the people you look up to. I look up to them.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's really awesome. So, okay, so switching gears, because I've got a lot of questions here and some of them are about Novation and some of them are outside of that. So what other, and you haven't necessarily had to have done these before, right? But outside of Novation, right? If someone's getting into real estate, they're like, hey, what strategies should I use? What creative acquisition strategies should I use outside of Novation, right? Because obviously sounds like that's number one for you. What are some other creative strategies that you think that you're bullish on in 2025?
I'm super bullish on subject to, right? A lot of my portfolio is sub 2 stuff. I really think, people overcomplicate it. but I mean, they come across so often, and so the sub two piece is, of course, taking over an existing note, positioning yourself on title, having the seller walk away from the liability. And it's just so they're not underwater, right? You got to think about every VA purchase is 0% down, right? You got to think about FHA. It's very low percentage down as well. And so if something happened and, with under, 24 months, a calendar year to 2 years, they got phantom equity, right? They bought at 315. It's now worth 340. And you go, yes, I got 25 grand. It's like, no, you don't, dude. You're going to list this bad boy, realtor fees, closing costs, capital gains. You're wiped. You're probably an owe money. So going into those situations, it's so easy to be like, well, why don't we just do this, right? You have a note that's, 3% or lower. Think about where these rates were a year ago, 2 years ago, and so you can get in front of some pretty outstanding opportunities. I've borrowed money from people and say, hey, I'll get you an annualized 15% return. And then I'll give this seller 10, 15K to walk away from the liability of this note. I'll take over and, I'll lock in that mortgage at a 2.8 or a 3.4. I borrowed money to give the homeowner, right? And I'm responsible for paying that lender, but I attach it to this home and I have to pay them, let's say $100 a month, but I can cash flow $500-600. I just bought a property, that's cash flowing for free, and I don't have to worry about it until the refi out. So I do that a lot, even with VA. People think you can't sub to VA, and I am not here to hold their entitlement, right? I'm not saying go out there and lock in a 20, 30 year. That's not okay. But if they're going to go deploy or they're going to go get stationed somewhere and they don't want to deal with it and the tenants and toilets, right? And they go, this is too much. Hold their eligibility for a couple of years until you can refinance it out and let them walk away with what's rightfully theirs. And now you got a home.
Yeah. Interesting. So question for you there, right? Because I've had many conversations with people about sub two.
Okay.
Some of them positive, some of them negative, right? And one of the things that comes up the most on the cons side of things is the fact that there are lenders that are becoming more and more aware of this, and they're starting to call these notes
due on sale. Yeah.
Right. And so there is and so I just saw the other day, like on a Facebook group that I'm a part of, like really like aggressive letter from an attorney on behalf of Wells Fargo that was like, yo, this is it, right? Like you gotta, like this note is due. So has that happened to you yet? If so, how did you get over it? If not, how have you seen others kind of overcome those challenges?
Yeah. So it has not happened to me, right? And, where I usually see it happen, and I've definitely seen it happen to people, it's actually, it wasn't as common to me. Whenever I brought it up, or I still kind of bring it up, a lot of people are like, what's the Oogie Boogie Man? That's, rarely comes out, right? But if it does, you got to always assume, real estate is a risk. You're coming in there, you're trying to provide a strategy. It may or may not work. And so that's just something that you might have to keep in the back of your head. But also, a lot of these subject twos, if you're going to be putting 20% down to be able to take over a note, the lender's already been able to accumulate quite a bit of interest. And so if they don't feel comfortable with it, they're okay calling their note because they made their money back. But on just getting a property a year or 2 years ago, they made really nothing on it. So a lot of the times when we're able to come in front of the phantom equity positions of people just buying within those 2 years, they haven't been able to, get any interest over their 30 years that they're hopefully going to be able to make money on monthly. So a lot of the times I don't ever really deal with it. I've never had to. I've never had a lender call it for me, but I've never leaned into properties that have been owned 7.5+ years. I usually think that's where it can kind of flag the system, and maybe they're just not open to it, or maybe they're mad that we're getting around it. Real estate's very much so, old dogs, new tricks kind of deal. And I can see a lot of lenders getting upset with that as well, but I've never had to deal with it.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. And I know that there's like attorneys and yada, yada, yada that like specialize in that, but it's interesting, right? So you try and focus on homes that have been held less than 7 years. And what's the strategy with these, right? So like, is the strategy hold on to them for a few years, sell them, take the spread, cash flow, right? Because at some point you are, the way it's structured, if I'm not mistaken, is that you are liable for the debt, correct? But if you don't perform, the seller gets the property back. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a great way to protect them, right? They get the all-inclusive trust deed to be able to secure their position. But yeah, you're totally right. I can't just take it over and be like, oops, they're going to get it back. And so if you renovated the home, you got a qualified tenant in there and you missed your payment by a couple of weeks, they can call their property back. And then you have an escrow. I usually use, but I use like an escrow account to position our funds through. They pay the note, right? And they'll get the equity payments if it's going to be to the seller. But yeah, I mean, if you renovate the home, you get a qualified tenant, they can end up getting that property back. And you don't want that. You don't want to lose any of your position. So you're pretty adamant on being proactive, with these homes. And for me, I usually do hold them for a couple years and then I'll just sell them. Or if the terms are great for like a DSCR, then I can refinance. But what I see for that is I'm not really going to cash flow. So these are just kind of ways to park my money, get some cash flow and kind of go from there. Unless I midterm it.
So one of the, right, which actually is kind of like the best way to do things right now. It's just kind of from what I've observed, like traveling nurses, 1 to 3 to 6 months at a time tends to be
I love
the greatest. Yeah, because the vacancies are short or less than short term, and the rents are a lot higher than long term. Yeah. Although you have to furnish them typically, right? So
you do. Like I furnish them. I even throw up drywall in my homes that I buy, right? So we'll put up drywall. I'll make a 4-bed, like a 6-bed or something, and we'll furnish it. It's very minimal though, right? I've had a couple Airbnbs myself, and you're doing the wall decor and the TVs and the kitchen utensils. Midterms, they don't actually want any of that, right? All you really need to do is furnish a bed, a mattress, a desk, sometimes a TV, but you don't have any common areas, right? It's more of like a kind of like a new age hostel, right? I did do that on a property that we had in Leander, Texas. And they're like, nobody wanted to use it, right? They don't really know each other, but at the same time, it's not, it's not like a rehab facility. I've done those before in San Bernardino County, and I wanted to stray away from that. This is just like school teachers and, plumbers and, college kids that are just transitioning out, Starbucks baristas, people who don't have, more of a lower income wage, but they're trying to save up and get their own home or things like that. They keep to themselves. And the cool thing about the company I use called Pad Split is it's like a little social credit score. If you're going and somebody's not wiping, not cleaning the bathroom afterwards, you can rate them. And then if it gets too low, like Pad Split will remove them. So it's like you all kind of rate each other, even though you're only with each other for a couple months. And we just removed our common areas, threw up some drywall and put a couple more rooms in there. And I just think it's the way things are going now, man. Like the new generation, dude, nobody wants to save for a house anymore, unfortunately. It's too much responsibility. What I see is all these young cats who have been staying in my place for months, paying me $205 a week per room, and they're saving all their money to go to music festivals and go crazy and then come back and work at Rayleigh's. You know what I mean? That's like what we rent to.
Oh my gosh, that is so real. That is unbelievably real. It's funny, but kind of sad, kind of funny. But I would also argue that it's almost like we're seeing that split, right? Like like it's really like low class, upper class, no middle class. You're starting to see that in the younger generation, because at the same time, there's a lot of younger generation that has never been hungrier and never been more educated and never been more exposed to this. I know 20-year-olds, dude, that are doing things that like 40-year-olds used to be doing, right? 50-year-olds, right? Like it used to, they're shortcutting decades, right? They're taking decades long shortcuts and building incredible wealth in their 20s. And it's, it's like good for them. I'm like, damn, if only I'd been born like 10 years later. Maybe, things would be a little...
It is would get crazy. People in my community, they're correct. I mean, like you said, instant gratification. You want to learn something, dude? Everything is right here. You could just learn everything. But then again, like you said, Danny, it's a great point. On the other side, if you don't have that drive, it's polar opposite. You know what I mean? It's people that had that college experience. They want to lean on other people as a crutch, and they just want to continue and foster that, environment. And they don't, and that's kind of what you're able to do. It's not like, houses are going to diminish, but allowing that, I don't think that's going to go away. I truly don't. I think congested living is only going to explode. I mean, we're putting properties together, got another one in Dallas. And before, we even have the walls up, or even in the start of renovations, we already have Pad Split stating that they already have people ready to go. And it's like, man, more and more just want that.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And it's really like that dichotomy, right? Like the hungry and the people that are looking for that crutch, as you said. Now, for the people who are hungry, there is Buyer Beater University. See what I did there? So, Trevor, do you want to tell us more about Buyer Beater University?
Of course, man. So, appreciate that beautiful transition.
I know. I'm full of them.
My God. So, Buyer Beater University, a big thing for me. It's an educational platform, right? It's something where when I got into real estate, I was able to stumble into the fact that it is approachable, like it's attainable. Like you don't have to do anything special. I'm not special, right? We're not special, right? The cool thing is though, you're able to kind of look and learn, and we create a roadmap to be able to learn what's necessary for you. So I don't want you to change your life for real estate, but there's definitely ways real estate can complement your situation right now. You know, I think the Novation piece is one aspect, right? Subject to seller carry. You want to get your license. You want to learn how to fix and flip. I mean, we teach all creative solutions for sellers. And the big thing is we're your bank in doing so. So you find it, we're able to fund it. We're backed by our private lenders for the best deals that you can bring. And I'm just going to teach you how to find them for free and then bring them on over. So that way, you know, you can throw up what I'm teaching and we can start doing deals together. That's really what it's for. It's a good community.
And I think that's the missing piece for a lot of mentorship and coaching platforms and programs that I've seen before. Is they teach you how to do it, right? And they give you kind of like the roadmap, but then the money is always, dude, it's always the money, right? It's always the money. The financing is always the key. And so you get these people all excited about doing things, and then it's like, where do I get the money to do this? So it sounds like you've solved for that by getting financial backing. And so like if they have a deal, they can at least do the first couple with you. Partner with you, and then that'll get them off to the races.
Oh yeah, dude, absolutely. It's a great way to put it. Always dangling the carrot. You know, it's kind of one of those. Like you're right there. No, but for us, you could even submit us deals, and if it's a great, you know, fix and flip, I'll always pay you 1% of the purchase price. You know, I mean, but when it comes into wanting to be a part of it, and you go, well, this is a good deal. I go, great. You know, I mean, let's get in front of it. I'll fund it. You get a portion of the proceeds. I take a majority, of course, and you know, you do 10 with me a month. It doesn't matter, you know, as long as they are good opportunities in the right area. And we just tell you where our buy box is, and you go out there and you find it, right? We have a lot of free channels to do so. You don't need to spend any money, you know, after you join it. Quite easy.
Well, all of the information on Buyer Beater University will be found in the show notes, and also links to get in touch with Trevor outside of that as well. Hey man, we're slowly coming up on time here. We do have a couple of minutes. And so I wanted to spend this last bit, you know, one thing that stood out to me, just kind of talking about the sub 2 and the Novation and some of these other strategies that we discussed, is that it seems to me, and this is especially true for sub 2, also seems to me like this is also kind of true for Novation, is that these strategies are built for the kind of market that we're in right now, meaning low appreciation, higher rates, people, rates adjusting, people getting stuck, right, in situations where they don't really, they can't afford things anymore, or cost of living goes up. And so they're forced to kind of like sell, but they don't have any equity in it because of the market that we're in. If we were in 2016, 2017, and someone was underwater, they would just wait 3 months and they wouldn't be underwater anymore.
True. Yeah.
And so it seems to me like some of these strategies kind of like the market conditions support them, but then the second that these market conditions change, some of those strategies are no longer viable options or are no longer as valuable, right? Like there's less of a value add for the seller, right? Which is kind of who you have to convince this. So what is your strategy when going underwater is no longer an issue for most of these guys? Because you're really sub 2 is kind of predicated upon that almost. Like you almost have to be underwater.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, right? There is a pivoting piece to it, right? You're ever evolving, right? For right now, I think it's great. You've got rates, in the sub 4s to the 3s again. You're going to throw that out the window. No one's going to be able to want to position this. And that's why I think creative can be very seasonal, right? There are definitely seasons when you can end up doing creative, just like there's seasons to fix and flip. I'm not going to buy a property in September, put it on the market in November. You know what I mean? But I'm going to wait to be able to position it, unless I'm in Arizona. That's actually it's still a good area. But yeah, identifying that, I'm a massive fan of the wealth building because you can get rich. And I think sub 2 is a great way to, collateralize, debt, get in front of, being able to hold properties, borrow more money and build, and kind of get rich with allocating more money to you. But also you have the get wealth position, and that's going to be holding, right? I think not straying away from the basics is so crucial. People tend to complicate what real estate is, right? I mean, obviously there's a buy low, sell high position. Well, it's not that easy. Yeah, but your network is definitely your network. There are ways. Real estate isn't rocket science. So I would say get in front of pockets that will end up making sense for rentals. There are places nationwide to do so. I don't think it's a secret. I go in Texas, property taxes are high. Leander, Dallas, New Braunfels, that area supports it very well, and there's a need for it. So get with a buddy or two, see what's going to be necessary, do a campaign, talk to agents and say, hey, I'm just looking for a good rental area. Buy it via DSCR and get one or two and see if it's for you. And I don't think you can ever go wrong with being able to hold property that way. And that's a great way to be able to start being able to position wealth.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm glad that you brought that up, right? It's like there's creative ways to do it, which is seasonal, right? So I would agree with you, right? It's like every season there's like a different strategy, and then because let's face it, right? Like in the market leading up to 2021, 2022, for the majority of like 10 years, fix and flip. I mean, there was just so much of a you could buy something in in January. You wouldn't even have to do anything to it. And by July, you could make money. And so, and then especially if you're putting lipstick on it and getting it spruced up. I mean, I knew a guy, he used to work as the front desk guy at the brokerage that I used to sell real estate at. And is a super quiet little kid, right? Super like unassuming. And one day he just ups and quits his job. Turns out this guy flipped a house, put 20 grand into it, and made 350 grand on the flip.
It's that easy. You could do it every time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You get it, brother. That is crazy. Now,
home run.
I do want to preface something as well. Like I want to hit that in an up market, right? When you talk about, hey, sub 2 will you do end up, really, like I said, it's seasonal, right? When rates start dropping, it's probably going to fall off. People just know, hey, get away from that. I know I'm going to have equity in 30, 60 days, And so still on the Novation piece, that is prime, right? You're always going to get in front of distressed sellers, situations of divorce and probates and pre-foreclosures or whatever. People losing their job is always going to happen. It's identifying that audience and being able to help that audience, right? So the Novation piece of renovating a home with the seller, that's my first question. And I've had great up markets. 2020, I crushed it with Novations because I came into it and I said, hey, your property is worth this. And then I know it could sell for that, but you can't sell for that because of the work that's needed. It's dated. You haven't done anything since 2002 or 2004. And so I just ask them, I go, do you have the money to be able to get it there? And they say no. And I go, well, how about this? Why don't we just partner up? Why don't I position the funding in there? We can sell it for what you see all your neighbors selling for, and I'll just be able to take a position of the equity for my investment, right? And so that's what we can do as well. And so you're able to work them into their equity with the optimism of coming in there and helping them get to that price. And so because they fly off the shelves like that, it's very easy. What 30, 40 grand in a house can do. It can make you an extra $30,000, $40,000, So, and to assume the marketing, the realtor fees, the closing costs, any concessions necessary, it's just a really good way to collaborate. So that's what we see all the time.
Yeah. And that's why I was saying, like, the Novation strategy seems to me like, there's right now, because of the market conditions, I could see it being slightly more enticing than before, where it's like, hey, why don't we just try the market because it's so hot? Maybe we'll get our price. Now people are a little bit more, I guess, in tune with the fact that like it's not all sunshine and rainbows out there right now. Like, there's homes are struggling to sell, and especially if you've got a home that's not curb appeal ready, it's
true.
It could be quite difficult to sell. But question for you on the Novation piece, by the way, have you ever structured it in a way where there's like a base price, like you're buying it for like, basically what a cash offer would look like, right? Yeah. And then you're splitting the upside with like a pro rata, like based on a percentage, like they keep like 30, 40%, you keep 50, 60%, 50, 50, something like that, or?
Absolutely. I do that all the time. That's why I love creative so much, because you can I mean, you get to play around with it, And
Right.
so if we're coming into a pretty big spread, and you get this all the time from sellers, let's say the same thing, right? You get in at 350, you're putting in 50 to sell for 5, and they go, Danny, this thing's going to sell for 6 all day. Like, I know the area, I know. And you're like, okay, well, I only need to make 5, So anything above that, why don't we just split, And so you get to work them into the optimism of that. And let's say it's a hot market, it sells for 550. They made an extra $25,000 off the work that you did. And so I love doing that. I hope it does go for more. I have a minimum I want to make. But I also do that. Like, we did a property in Los Angeles, and, they did state that we got it at a pretty darn good price. And, and I'm very open. You need to over communicate with your homeowners. You forget that you're going to be in the same vehicle with them going down the highway of a transaction for months. You got to be on the same page. And so I show them, I say, this is where our estimates are, and this is how I can get you involved with that. Sometimes they go, that's a lot of money, Trev. Can I make some money off that? And I go, of course, right? You can make 20, 25%. And so it just both works us in the way where we're going to come to the closing table together. And, I'm never afraid to put money in my friends' pockets. I find every sellers are my friend. They allow me to come into their home and their situation and help resolve it. And so I love that, and that's how you get residual business. And that's kind of where you start being able to build with that.
Yeah. And just, I don't know you that well, right, Trevor? Because we just, we connected and this is the first time that we're talking face to face. But what I can tell is that you have a very genuine demeanor, right? And I think that goes a long way when you're talking to sellers, right? When you're talking to potential partners, is they could probably sense that genuineness, right? And that you're, because let's be real, right? Like, I think anyone, like, whether you're a real estate agent, a wholesaler, a flipper, whatever you do in real estate, it's like people look at you like you're like a slimy salesperson. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like they all feel like and it's like we're like evil. But it's like, no, dude, it's actually, you're providing a service, right? Like they would never get that price if it wasn't for you stepping in there and getting them even close to where they want to go. Right. So I do think that there's, a bit of a mindset shift there.
It totally, by the way, I appreciate that, man. It all comes down to the fundamentals of people do business with people, right? You're not calling them with the agenda. I always say when you're on the phone, you're not prospecting the property, you're prospecting the person, right? Do they want to go into business with you? What can you provide for them? And when you do that, it's funny because you start breaking down the fourth wall, you get, break down the barriers, and then all of a sudden they're a lot more open to seeing how you can provide a service. That's what I say all the time. I'm an investor, right? I take my investor hat off, though I put my service hat on, and I can do this for you now, right? And so there's a lot of things where you can hold your seller's hand towards a solution that best fits them. So, if they need to move quickly, I can't, but I can buy quick. They can give me a couple months and we can do this. It's already renovated. Let's refer you to an agent. I mean, allowing the solution piece. But yeah, what you're saying though, all the time, people think I hate wholesalers. I don't, man. But it is definitely, the voice of the majority is from the voice of the minority, right? You have a lot of people, you have some people who have ruined it for us. You know what I mean? Where it's just really unfortunate. And that's why reputation travels a lot further. You hear the bads of investment real estate before you hear any of the goods. But we're just here to try to, churn that wheel, and so by allowing better testimonials. And so my team does a really good job on that. It's not just me, I think that stems from, what we represent and our core values. And we always have family first as one of our core values. And so they go into conversations with that. That's pretty cool. After you do a deal, you end up going, this Novation thing's cool. Like I have an uncle in New Mexico. He's moving to Arizona, but he needs a new roof. Can you do that? And it's like, yeah, right. Because you can just dabble. A 10K can make you 10K. It doesn't need to be $100,000. It can just be a small service that you can position to get them to where they want to go. And that's why the pipeline's always full.
Love that, man. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Trevor, we are coming up on time here, but in traditional Gould Mine fashion, we're going to have you lead the audience with one final gold nugget. Take it away.
Boom. So something I would like to say that I heard on stage one time that I have written down on my mirror forever is imperfect action is better than perfect non-action. Right? You can't wait for all the lights to turn green before you go. Put the foot on the pedal and see exactly how fast your speed is right now. Because I tell you, you're going to fail forward into this, right? You're not going to have all the answers. We're still figuring it out, man. But the imperfect action piece just means that you're taking one step forward more. And in order to be a part of the 1%, you got to do what 99% won't do, and that's start. So I highly recommend you start.
Love that, man. Trevor, this has been awesome, man. Really enjoyed having you on the show, and look forward to all of your future success, man.
Danny, appreciate you, man. Thank you.
All right, brother. Cool.